Hey guys, what's up? Today, as you can probably tell from the title, I'm going to be sharing my exclusive pumping and breastfeeding experience with you guys. First, I really want to start off with the disclaimer of you can do this. If you are watching this because you want to exclusively pump for your baby for whatever reason, you can do it. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what doubts you have in your mind. You can definitely do this. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be pleasurable most of the time. But if this is your goal, then there is no reason why you shouldn't be able to reach it, barring any medical concerns. And I think it's also important to remember that just because somebody else pumps exclusively for like 2 years or something, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a reasonable or achievable goal for you. Just keep that in mind as I'm sharing my experience with you, because my experience is not going to be your experience, and neither of us is a better mom than the other because one can pump longer or one chooses to not pump as long. So I just want to share kind of what I went through and what happened with me, and you can take what advice you find helpful. The very first tip that I have for you is to see a lactation consultant ASAP. So I received this advice myself about breastfeeding, and I did intend to breastfeed, and I saw a lactation consultant the first day I was in the hospital. There are probably like 5 or 6 lactation consultants that work at my hospital, and I probably saw all of them multiple times while we were there. We were there for 2 weeks because my daughter was admitted to the NICU. So we were there for quite a while, and I did have access to these professionals the entire time, which was really awesome experience. Even with all of those resources, I was not able to breastfeed. My daughter was put on oxygen, and it's really hard for them to take feedings at all after that. And it was just a fight getting her to eat by mouth. She had a feeding tube, and that's how she was primarily fed for the first couple weeks of her life. And just the more and more we tried to breastfeed her, it really would upset her. Like, she would push me away, she would get upset, she would fall asleep, whatever. She didn't want to do it, and I didn't want to pressure her into something that she wasn't ready for. And I also felt like trying to breastfeed her would extend our stay at the hospital, because they won't let you leave until your child is taking a certain amount of food by mouth. Because obviously, like, if they take the feeding tube out and you go home and your child's not eating, then that's an issue. So that is actually what delayed her from leaving. So that was the decision that I chose to make in the moment, was to wait and see if she'd be ready to breastfeed at a different time. So I pumped for her, and the first week is definitely the hardest. You're waiting for your milk to really come in the first couple days. And what I mean by that is milk rather than colostrum. You have obviously a form of milk in your breast from the moment your baby is born, but while you're kind of waiting for your regular supply to come in rather than the small amounts of colostrum, it can be kind of weird. You know, your breast sizes are changing. You don't know what size flanges to use to be the most comfortable, and you don't know what settings to put it on, because it's like from time to time it will shift. Like, you'll pump at 1 and then you'll pump at 4, and you may be a different flange size, you may be wanting a different intensity, and you get such mixed advice, which is why I say see a lactation consultant as soon as possible. Get them to do a flange fitting on you, and call them back all the time. If you feel like your flanges aren't fitting correctly, ask them to recheck you, ask them to resize you. They won't get offended by this. They understand that your breast shape is going to change a lot in those first couple days. So definitely see a lactation consultant as soon as possible to help with the troubleshooting and things. So at first, you're going to want to pump every 2 to 3 hours after your baby is born, or every time your baby receives a bottle. The way that you go about this really is completely up to you, and your lactation consultant may tell you you need to do it these times or these times, but especially if you're home, you just have to do what your schedule allows you to do. For me, I pumped every 2 to 3 hours because my child never cluster fed. She was fed by a feeding tube, so she was on a schedule. So I was able to also follow that same schedule of about every 3 hours. And my milk supply was really good in the beginning. It wasn't super oversupplied. It was more than what she needed, but it wasn't such an oversupply that I was constantly getting engorged and in pain, which I'm super thankful for. Although I did have other periods where I experienced that, but that wasn't something that was a concern for me in the beginning. I will just say though, to take advantage of this time, during this time, especially if you're not oversupplying or undersupplying too extremely, don't skip out on pumps or space pumps out way too far, because this is going to really help you establish a milk supply for later on when your supply does drop. And unfortunately for most women who do exclusively pump, your milk supply will drop at one time or another. For me, it was about 2 months in, and I really relied on this extra milk supply that I had built in the hospital. So that's something that's really important to establish at first if you can, but definitely don't push yourself to a point of overproducing, because like I said, that can cause engorgement, clogged ducts, mastitis, and those things can be really painful, really scary, really difficult to deal with. A couple things that I experienced that were really weird that no one really warned me about was my lopsided supply. So usually you have one breast that supplies more than the other, and I was really concerned about this. I was like, oh, like this one isn't, like I'm not pumping it effectively. What do I do about that? And I would ask the lactation consultant, and they were like, oh, it's fairly normal, like to an extent. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, how much? Because like this one will pump double what the other one does. And they kind of really didn't have anything to say to me about it, which was interesting. But I will just say I never experienced any type of pain or anything from this. And at times my underproducing breast would actually produce more than the other one. It would be like maybe once a week or something, it would produce just slightly more than the other one. So I think it was just, that was how my supply divided itself. I can't really speak to why it does that, but that's something that could totally happen to you and is totally normal. Another thing that I experienced was I would sweat a lot while I would pump. I don't know if breastfeeding mamas also experience this, but like I wasn't hot. I wouldn't get hot. I would just literally start dripping sweat from my armpits. Like literally, it was like not even like damp. It was like dripping sweat, which was really bizarre. And this was only really at first, within the first month, I'd say. So that's really weird and apparently pretty normal as well. One more thing that no one really talked to me about, and lactation consultants kind of freaked me out about this. So like exclusively pumping isn't super common. I guess I just assumed that it was more common and that lactation consultants would be very well versed in how to deal with my particular situation. I didn't always find that they were, and I actually had at first, while I was still pumping colostrum, I would have like bubbles of milk that would like stay on my nipple. You'd think you could just like touch it and it would pop because it's liquid, and it wouldn't. It might kind of like deflate a little bit, but it was still there. So I would kind of like pick at it and try to get it out, and sometimes I would do that and then it would come back the next time I pumped, and I was like, well, I'm not going to do this every single time. But eventually it stopped doing that. I don't know what causes that. I don't know if that's normal, but it didn't hurt me in any way. Eventually I got kind of a thick yellow film that formed over my nipples that did not go away, and then as my milk came in, it kind of turned like a white colored film. Now, I will say that can be a sign of like some type of bacterial infection or something. So if you have pain in your breasts associated with a discoloring of your nipple, definitely go see a lactation consultant and make sure everything is okay. I was basically told by my lactation consultant that since I didn't have a child coming in contact with that part of my nipple to kind of get that film off with her tongue, that of course it was going to stay there. So, and I will also say I applied nipple cream every single time I pumped at first, and so I was even like rubbing my nipples, and I had nipple pads, and none of that took it off. I guess right now is a good time to kind of talk about the supplies that I used. So there are a few things that will save your life if you're exclusively pumping. I'm going to try to talk about these very quickly. One thing is just learning when and how to massage. Ask your lactation consultant about massages that you can do. But I personally would I would try to massage for just a couple minutes every time before I would pump to help bring my supply forward to make the most effective pump I could. But then there's also another type of massaging you can do if you're experiencing like fluid buildup, and that's kind of a massage actually like backwards, trying to massage the fluid into your armpit. So if you have fluid buildup or you're wanting a more effective pumping session, you should ask your lactation consultant about those types of hand massages. Some things aside from that definitely helped me a lot was I had a little vial that they gave me in the hospital, and I filled it with olive oil. You can also use coconut oil or some other type, and I would coat my flanges. I personally would take the oil and stick my finger inside and coat this entire part, and then I would even do some just around like the opening on the actual flange itself. This really helped with just kind of easing the friction while I was pumping and really helped to relieve pain. So if you're experiencing pain, I would say definitely use olive oil. It helped me so much, and this was recommended to me by a lactation consultant. They assured me that the transference would be so minimal that it's not going to harm or affect the baby in any way, so don't worry about that. It's similar to using like nipple creams and stuff. They're formulated so that they don't harm your baby. I personally used the Boob Ease brand, or I don't know even what brand this is, but this is their Boob Ease nipple gel. I used pretty much all of it. It's practically empty, as you can tell. And there were times that I really liked this, and this one is actually lanolin free. So if you for whatever reason can't have lanolin gel, which is what this one is, the other one that I used, if you're like allergic to that or your baby doesn't respond to it, you can use this one. If it doesn't matter to you, then I personally use the Lancino brand. This one I found you had to like squeeze a little bit out and then rub it between your fingers quite a bit before you rubbed it on your skin. This one I could put right onto my skin. I liked them at different times. I liked them for different reasons, but I did use both of these. I had other ones as well, like sample packets, and I never really used them because these worked for me. Another thing is to get 2 different types of nipple pads. So I personally don't use disposable ones because I think that they're a waste of money and resources, and if you use them, that's fine. I have some for just in case that were really given to me by other moms, but I would suggest just investing in reusable ones. You just wash them and it's fine. You want to make sure you change them fairly regularly though, so you don't get an infection on your nipples, and it's just all around better to do that. And if you're an oversupplier or you leak a lot, you're going to need to change them pretty regularly anyways. I was not a big leaker, especially in the beginning, so it wasn't really an issue for me. So that being said, I had these one, which are the same brand. The Bamboo Bees is the same brand as that cream stuff, the black container. And they have like a soft bamboo side and then like a waterproof side, and they're very, very thin. Whereas these ones are just off of Amazon, and it's kind of just like a polyester material, and they're much thicker. I really enjoyed like the security I felt in the thicker ones. This one is definitely a little bit more discreet. So kind of, pick your poison. If you're a big leaker, you may not really find this helpful. Just you see what works for you. I would suggest using both kinds. All right, obviously the number one thing, a pumping bra, okay? For some reason, I was like, oh, like I don't need a pumping bra. I'll just like hold these. And for the first almost the first month, I literally would sit there and I would hold my flanges and I would like position my leg to like hold this one in place so that I could like skip to the next YouTube video or next show. Like just invest in a pumping bra. It was like $12, and just I don't know why I was so stubborn about not getting one. So just get one. This was probably off of Amazon. I don't even know what brand it is. It has straps that you can completely remove if you'd like. Eventually, this became the only bra I would wear. So if you even want to invest in a couple, that's probably not a bad idea because it was hard to coordinate washing this in between pumps sometimes. But basically, just the way it works is it has a layer, or this brand specifically, it has a layer that goes out like this and then a layer that goes up and down like that. That's how you access your nipple. And it also has like a zipper for easy like insertion of things if you need to use that, whatever. It's pretty self-explanatory, but then basically this material holds it in place. So good stuff right there. So I did mention that I experienced engorgement and clogged ducts at times. Honestly, I probably should talk about this more when I'm talking about my weaning process, because that's when I experience it the most, but I also experience it at other times as well. Basically, just try to pump a little bit longer. Make sure you're really getting in there with the massaging. Make sure you're using oil while you're massaging. keeping a warm compress on it, you know, those types of things. You can look up online to find other ways, but I just found that it kind of went away with time. And the only reason I got clogged ducts was because I slept through a couple of my pumping sessions. And yeah, I mean, I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have a huge oversupply, so it wasn't a big issue for me. So if you aren't a huge oversupplier, then you probably won't find it as an issue either. I actually use 3 different pumps, so this is probably the most helpful information that you guys will find, because you're probably like, I have no idea what pump to get. So I have this Medela pump that was given to me by a friend. To be honest, I don't even know what kind of pump it is. It came in a travel tote, so I think this is like their travel kind. But I also used a Medela one, the hospital grade one, while I was in the hospital. I enjoyed that sometimes. I enjoyed this one more sometimes. And then once, I don't know, after a little bit, that one kind of started to feel like it was kind of ineffective, like it was causing a little bit more pain. And so I actually had another, I feel like this one is pretty common. This is the Spectra S2. I really liked this one. I felt like it was very effective, and I liked that it had a night light, so I really enjoyed using this one at home. And then I would use my Medela one while I was on the go, because it did come with a travel battery pack to make it easier to transport and go around with. If you don't have a pump that has that, or if you just don't like your pump that has that, I did invest in it's a car conversion to a outlet. This was like 20 bucks on Amazon, and it's the Buy What brand. And this worked pretty well. So you just plug in your car, you plug your pump into here, bam, you're ready to go. So you can take any pump, and I know most pump manufacturers also sell things with battery packs, but since I do have 3 different types of pumps, and I was like, oh, I want to be able to use this for more than just like pumping, or I just felt like that was a better investment, so that's what I chose to do. So one issue that I did not like about the Spectra was the way it works is it is attached to a cord that has the guard thingy on it, and then you plug those together, and this is all one thing. So it was really hard to get into my pumping bra, basically. If you compare this style to the Medela style, the flange comes off and this unscrews from the bottle. So I was able to kind of put this inside my pumping bra, and then I would put I would put this to my breast, I'd put the pumping bra straps over this part, over the skinny part, and then zip it up. When I did this one, I had to take this whole thing and try to shove it in through my pumping bra. It's really probably not that big of a deal, but it was one thing that when I got this, I was like, oh, that's really stupid design. And so that was the one thing I didn't like about this pump. I also didn't like that for this one, I feel like it's more versatile, the bottle you can put in here. This is not even a Medela brand bottle. These are just the storage bottles they use in the hospital. And I think that these ones fit a lot more storage bottles, whereas this one, I could only use the specific Spectra bottle that it came with, because this is a very wide base that it screws to. So I don't know, basically I thought that this one was a little bit more like not as versatile. This one was a little bit more versatile. But my favorite one overall that takes the cake is the Lynx one. So this one I feel like is also pretty common. This is the Smart Pump 2.0. This is the one I got free through insurance, and I didn't even get it until a little bit later on, but I like this one because it's small, it's compact, it travels easier than my Medela one. Again, I didn't have the car or the portable charger, so I had to use the car charger. And if I ever wasn't in the car, then I had to be near an outlet. So I guess that's one downside to that. It never was an issue for me. I was always either able to plan my pumping around when I would be home or whatever, or do it in the car or whatnot. So I really enjoyed this one. It has a screen that lights up, so it doesn't have the night light function that the Spectra has. You know, I could turn on the light before I turned on the pump and help put my flanges together and get myself ready and then turn on the pump. This one, the light only helps with the screen. It doesn't help you see what you're doing, so I had to use like my phone flashlight for that, which again, it's kind of nitpicky, but when this is your life, things like that make a big difference. So I personally kept my Spectra on my nighttime table. I would use that at nighttime. I kept this one downstairs, so if I was downstairs, I could easily use this one during the day, or I would pack it up, and eventually this became my travel pump. And it did come with a tote and everything as well. My Medela one, I also used that for travel and things, and if I was doing a longer trip, I would take my Medela because I had the option of plugging it into the car or using the battery pack. So, and it does take like 8 AA's, so the battery pack lasts a really long time. Yeah, but really it's kind of up to you. People are gonna prefer different things, and I know not everyone has the option of buying 3 different pumps. So it's really hard for me to say which ones are going to be best for you. I also really liked the Lancino flange situation. It's kind of like the Medela in that the flange actually comes off and puts on. It also has like the silicone ring to make it more comfortable. So, but I, again, like the issue with the Spectra, it has like a wide base top, so you really could only use the Lancino bottles, or I don't know, maybe it screws into other things as well, but I didn't have any bottles it would screw into other than these. But I will say, and I don't know why this happened, if this was a fluke or what, but I was sent extra Lancino parts twice in the mail. Like I got this, and then a month later they sent extra parts, and then another month later they sent more extra parts. So that really became a non-issue for me. I did talk about how I traveled while pumping. I drove, it's an 8.5-hour drive from where I live to where my parents live, and I kind of talk about my setup for that. If you want to see that more in depth, I could maybe do a video on that. Just let me know in the comments, or if I'll just run through it really quickly. I use my Medela. I had the most extra parts for that because they were given to me by a different friend who actually gave me the Spectra pump, not even the Medela pump, so that's confusing. But basically she had a bunch of extra parts. She gave them to me, and I had like 4 or 5 sets of flanges, and so whenever I was done with one set, I would put those in a cooler bag so that they wouldn't grow bacteria, a cooler bag with an ice pack, and then I would use my fresh new clean one with a new bottle, and the only thing I had to keep reusing was the screwing top, but even those I had a couple of them. So maybe for you, you just want to buy a bunch of extra things anyway, because it definitely helps you to not have to clean up every single time you pump, because that becomes super tedious to clean every single time you pump. Especially if you're pumping from work, you may just want to bring enough sets that you have for however many times. If you're going to pump 4 times, you'll bring 4 sets and then keep them in the work refrigerator in a bag or something like that. Extra sets definitely are a key to helping. Otherwise, you can always go into a bathroom and wash them. You know, just bring a little travel size soap and wash them out and then have them. But I feel like you would have to stop a ridiculous amount of times, especially if you're still pumping every 2 or 3 hours, which I was at the time. So yeah, we already made the 8.5-hour trip like 11 hours to stop for diaper changes and stuff, so we were trying to like keep the ball rolling as much as possible. I talked earlier about fighting with the supply a little bit. And like I said, every mom who is exclusively pumping will probably experience a low supply at one time or another. So what was suggested to me and what helped me the most was power pumping. The goal with power pumping is you can really do it at any time, but it's suggested to do it between like 2 a.m. and really early in the morning, like, you know, between midnight and 5 a.m., something like that. Because that's when your body creates the most prolactin, and I don't know if that's the same for everyone. Like if you work night shifts, if that would be the same for you because your circadian rhythm is backwards. I don't know. You'll have to ask your lactation consultant about that. Typically that's how it is. That's when your body creates the most of that hormone. So that's when you're going to pump the most. And so I would try to power pump really early in the morning, like at 5 in the morning. I would power pump, which means I'd pump for 20 minutes, rest 10 minutes, pump for 10 minutes, rest 10 minutes, and then pump for 10 minutes. And then 3 hours from that point, depending on how often I was pumping, I guess, I would go ahead and pump again and then just resume my regular schedule for the rest of the day. So this helped establish a larger supply for my day, because obviously the breast pumping is supply and demand based. So this established my supply for the day, and it also, I produced a lot in the morning, and I kind of had that to buffer throughout the day, so I wasn't pumping and then giving her what I was pumping and then pumping and giving her what I was pumping. Like I had a little bit extra. I would just do that until my supply was regularly back up. My supply would usually stay up for 2 weeks or a week and a half, and then I'd have to power pump again. So, and you don't power pump for just one day, you power pump for until your supply is up again. So usually it would take me 3 or 4 days of power pumping, and then I would get to, like, for 7 to 10 days not power pump again, and then I'd have to start power pumping again. So, you know, doing the massaging, the hands-on expression, all that good stuff, getting, you know, as often as you can, making sure you're pumping for at least 12 minutes if you're in a crunch, but definitely 15 to 20 minutes is recommended. I do just want to kind of close out by saying it can definitely be an overwhelming experience. You can feel like a slave to your pump sometimes. Like, you can't really leave your house for more than a couple hours unless you want to pack up 6 bags of stuff to take with you. So it can feel like you're kind of a slave to your pumping schedule. You know, I was desperate to kind of breastfeed at one point, and you know, when I was really sick and tired of pumping after I'd been doing it for like 3 months, I tried to breastfeed. I saw a lactation consultant, but she had a really, really painful latch, and I mean, my nipples were just destroyed because I also had to like try to breastfeed her, and then she wouldn't get enough. It was, if I even got her to latch correctly, she wouldn't get enough, and so then I'd have to bottle feed her the rest of it, and then I'd have to pump. And then I would wait 20 minutes and then try breastfeeding her again because it was already time for her to eat again, because that's how long this whole process takes. I was really desperate for that, but whenever I realized that that was what it was going to be and that her latch was painful, I realized that that wasn't a realistic goal for me, and I already had that mindset coming in that it was a possibility that that wouldn't happen, and I was okay with that. So just to remember that, like, you know, don't put too much pressure on yourself, because it doesn't make you a failure as a mom because you can't breastfeed or because you can't continue to pump. So just keep a healthy mindset about all of these things. Fed is best. So however you can feed your child, you need to do that. I've breastfed, I've pumped, and I've had her on a feeding tube. We've done formula. We've done breast milk by bottle. We've done it all. So, and you know, she's fine. You know, she really wasn't like more healthy or better during one than the other. I know tons of people who breastfed, some kids formula fed the other kids, and you can't tell a difference today. So don't put too much pressure on yourself, really. Actually, after that, once I realized my breastfeeding thing wasn't going to happen and I was sick and tired of pumping, I decided to start weaning. So instead of pumping every 2 hours, I started pumping every 2.5 hours for a few days. Then I went every 3 hours for a week, every 4 hours, 5 hours, and then 6 hours for a couple weeks until I felt comfortable trying to stop. So some people quit cold turkey, but I was really scared of getting mastitis and I was really engorged. So I decided to slowly wean. It took me 6 to 8 weeks to completely wean that. And so if you're thinking like, oh, I want to stop pumping, well, and even during that time, during my weaning time, I was like, oh, like I could continue to do this. But by the time I was done weaning, I was like, yeah, I'm glad that I continued to wean because I was really ready for it to be done. So if you're feeling like you're ready for it to be done and you don't want to quit cold turkey, then go ahead and start the weaning process. And the nice thing about weaning is, you know, if you get down to pumping every 3 hours and then every 4 hours, you can always work your way back up if you need to. And where I kept thinking like, oh, my supply will probably just drop in a couple days and like I'm not going to be able to make milk anymore and there's no going back. It wasn't like that. Even after like 8 weeks of weaning and then trying to stop cold turkey, I would still like leak milk and drip milk throughout the day and feel engorged and all kinds of things. So it was really hard for me to actually like completely lose my supply, although my supply was very, very small toward the end. But all that to say, like, it can be a reversible process, whereas quitting cold turkey really isn't reversible. I did have a goal to do until 6 months when she could eat solids, but really I'm just glad that I at least got her to 2 months. She was exclusively breastfed for 2 months or fed breast milk for 2 months. Then she got her vaccines and was establishing an immune system of her own. And so I felt like that's probably a really good and attainable goal for most moms. It was probably about 3 months that she only had breast milk. No, it was like 2 months that she only had breast milk. And then after that, we started mixing breast milk and formula for a couple months. And then she kind of went to totally formula. That was a lot more than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to be able to do all of this in like 15 minutes. And this video is already really long, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off there. I'm not going to do some type of rambly long outro. I was gonna cut it off. So thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.